Hello, everyone. It is 2 o'clock on the West Coast of the United States. Patrick Scott here. Uh, Happy Friday. Here we are. So, it's a wild ride. If you work with people, as I do, people are struggling. Last week we talked about, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago, I think it was last week. I was in Minnesota and we talked about what was going on in Minnesota. And if you haven't been under a rock, you understand that there's a lot of chaos and turmoil going on in the state of Minnesota and the city of Minneapolis specifically right now. That continues. Just to report to you, I was there. I live there, so I mean, I'm here in Las Vegas now at the office, the clinic in Las Vegas called Heads Up, which I adore. It's my love project, and it's. I think it's calming down. I mean, I would hope. The protests lately have been largely peaceful. No one has been killed lately that I'm aware of, and so I'm hoping that this too shall pass. Joshua Hayduke says my skin looks amazing, borderline elvish, flawless. Think Legolas from Lord of the Rings. I will take it. Um, Thank you. I've been working at it. I appreciate it. Um, and so just today, I get a lot of people reaching out for help, for energy. People who are my clients, people who are not my clients, people who are my students. And the overall level of anxiety and intensity has been really high on the planet lately. I don't know that it's any higher than it always is, but things go in cycles and rhythms. And we've talked about the full moon, and we've talked about how, life is a series of cycles and rhythms. Talked to you about my mom and how, in the 60s, she said that the country was going to hell in a handbasket, and this idiot president, pick whichever one you want. I started with Eisenhower, and I've been with every president since Eisenhower. And I think I told you this is a funny story for me that I was doing Alzheimer's evaluations a few years ago, and I don't even remember who the president won. It may have been Clinton, it may have been H.W. Bush, it may have been George W. Bush, it may have been Obama. I don't remember. Um, but I would go and part of the cognitive assessment, for Alzheimer's is to say, are they oriented? Do they know who they are? And, do they know what day it is? Do they know, and, with older people, particularly people who are suffering from cognitive challenges, they're forgetful and they may not know where they are, who they are. And so we have to assess for that. And one of the key questions is who's the president of the United States? And oftentimes I would be doing these evaluations in the home. I would travel to wherever the senior was, and oftentimes there were family members there. And if you think about from a senior point of view, the biggest fear of a senior is losing independence, is being put in a nursing home, being, just not being independent, not being able to take care of yourself anymore. And, I'm not going to go into the stages of how that happens. I think it's pretty self-evident. One of the early stages of cognitive decline is anger and, supreme forgetfulness. And then as it progresses, it goes, and this is not a video about Alzheimer's, but I'm going to use it to make a point that nearly, well, I'll say many of the seniors that I interviewed when I said, "And who's the president of the United States? Okay, what day is it? You know, Saturday. Well, it was Thursday. Yeah, what's the date today? It's, March 7th. Well, it's January 30th. So they would just throw out because again, now I represent, forgive me, whether we like it or not, they're staying at home or they're being institutionalized, being put in a home or a hospital or whatever. And so they were trying to show up like they had full command of their faculties, and they didn't. And but one of the common threads when I said, "And who's the president of the United States?" the answer is whoever the president of the United States is by name. And quite often I said, "Oh, it's that idiot." That's what I would get. "Oh, it's that idiot." And there you go. Now, today's talk is about this polarization. And I do want to talk about your thinking and how you reconcile these disparate energies, these polar opposites, these dichotomies, if you will, where you see the news or social media, you see what's going on, whether it's in Minnesota or anywhere, because the world is loaded with hotspots right now. And then how do you exist on the planet right now and stay peaceful, stay grounded, stay happy and joyful in the face of what's going on, in terms of human suffering. Now, if you follow me and you're looking at this, chances are you're a light worker of some sort. You're a practitioner, a clinician, a coach, hypnotist, something. And I'm noticing this in my own practice. I'm here at the clinic that more than ever before, people need our help. And the good news, not only that, there's less stigma around it, meaning people understand that it's totally okay to reach out and ask for help, whether and of any kind, whether that's in a holistic, more complementary and alternative manner, or a more medical model, that I work in. I work in a medical facility, a psychiatric facility. I, work with and teach doctors of all shapes and sizes how to be better clinicians. And if you're a helper person, people will come to you. Now, what I want to talk about today is how do you stay neutral? How do you understand and process your own feelings when you get opinions, very, very strong opinions from other people who do not share your opinion? And so I am not advocating. Well, actually, on the one hand, I am advocating that you stay pretty neutral when you're a clinician. If you're a clinician or a therapist or a provider of some sort, of any kind, whether that's with a more alternative complementary way, your office is not the place to debate or to argue. And I'll tell you a funny story. I've told it before. Years ago, this is when Obama was in the office. I had a man referred to me. He was referred by it was a mandated thing. It wasn't court, but it was like his employer sent him to me for anger management. He was a bus driver, and he worked in a more ethnically diverse area of Las Vegas, and he kept getting into arguments with the passengers. And bless his heart, he was a white man in about like in his 50s, which I was at the time, and a skinhead, crew cut, super white guy, I guess. And he came in with, a lot of complaints about people of diverse ethnic origin, and that he would get into these fights or arguments. They were physical. They never got physical, but people would ask him for free rides in the bus, and this was in a lower income area. And he would just lose his mind, with people trying to sneak on the bus or get on the bus and not pay, or didn't not have a bus pass or whatever it is. And so he was written up many times, and all of his arguments were on camera because every inch of that bus, if the buses now are completely surveilled. And so he would, this was very, and again, they understood that it was frustrating that many homeless and indigent people were trying to, hitch free rides, and he had a job to do, and he had a job to collect the fare, and he was just trying to do his job. Well, what he walked in with was, well, these, and then he would use expletives to describe the various people of diverse ethnic origin. And I just sat there, and this is our first session. And I said, well, what do you want to get out of this? And he said, well, if I want to keep my job, I'm going to have to learn how to manage my anger more effectively, because I lose my mind with these people. And he would describe them with very pejorative terms, the N word, and pick your ethnicity and pick your pejorative term to describe the ethnicity. For those of you that are as old as I am, you remember Archie Gumbunker, the All in the Family. In fact, Rob Reiner just died recently, who was on that show. This guy was an Archie Bunker, meaning a pretty white supremacist member of the white Aryan resistance, very proudly, had done time, was working as a bus driver. It was a good job, paying really good money, needed the job, but he was very proud in his righteousness about these people. And now, understand, if you know me, and Joshua says, sometimes the bus is the only place that a homeless person You can squeeze in maybe an hour. Okay. And I'm going to try to pay attention to the chat. So please, your comments are welcome. By the end of the session, the very first session, now he's mandated, meaning his employer had a contract with the bus company to provide employee assistance for them. And he was referred, and it was mandated. And basically, he had to go through anger management classes or counseling or something that I would sign off on at the end of our time together, saying that he was managed. And in that very first session, a couple things were notable. He used the expletives, and I asked him. I said, I would prefer you didn't use, that language. He goes, I know. And he goes, I know it's offensive. And he goes, that's my problem. Is that I'm just always offensive, and I really got to get a handle on it. I said, okay, how about we start in here? You don't use the N word. You don't use any of those words to describe these people of diverse ethnic origin. And then he said, and then that effing N word president, Barack Obama. And I could feel myself start to escalate about that. I said, okay, number two, couple things. Secondly, please don't use the president of the United States in that term. Like him, don't like him. Please, in this office, and he goes, I get it. He goes, I'm doing it again. I just can't control myself. I'm just so full of opinion. And he was reasonable. He had his language and stuff, but he had his spewing of the epithets and that kind of thing. So I said, okay, now please, let's just, if we're going to work together, I'm going to need you to manage yourself in here. This is my office, and I get to determine what I tolerate and what I won't tolerate in here. And I said, now there's a new problem. And what he said was, I wish someone would assassinate that effing N-word president. I said, okay, now I need to educate you. You may say this is not being recorded, meaning in my office there are no recording devices that are on, and there's a lot of rules about that. I'm not taking video. There's no surveillance cameras. There's no audio recording unless you ask for it, and I do record some of my sessions by request, hypnosis and that kind of stuff. But in general, a therapist's office is a sacred, quiet place where people can vent, and so he's venting. And I said, as a word of warning to you, please do not take that language about that president outside of this room. And for God's sake, don't put it on social media, Facebook or anything like that, because, you will be arrested. I mean, if you make any sort of threats to the president, again, like him, don't like him, agree with him, don't agree with him. And the president, by the way, is a metaphor. I'm in the NLP terms chunking way up here, right? So we've got a lot of granular things going on right now, wars and all sorts of stuff going on the planet right now. And we have a president, and we always have a president. And usually about half the nation doesn't like the president, and the other half of the nation likes the president. And that's kind of how it goes. And that's how it's gone my whole life. And so I have a point of view that some of you who are younger don't have, that this president is colorful and unique, and all the presidents we have had, hence my Alzheimer's patients going, that idiot, right? And there's going to be half the people that don't like him, and there's going to be half the people that just think he's the greatest thing since sliced bread. Well, this particular guy did not like that president, and I am sorry, the phone is ringing, and I am going to turn it off. I should have turned it off. Doing that today. Some of it's calls, but a lot of people are reaching out for help as well. Idiot, president, guy, spewing. Okay, so I said, please don't put that on Facebook or any social media, or be too vocal about that, because you'll be arrested. I mean, they take that very seriously, even if you're just angry. But to make a threat or to suggest that someone assassinate the president, please don't mess with that. Please don't. I'm just educating you. You're a big boy. You can do whatever you want. We'll get into the anger management training, and we'll do it. So at the end of the session, he looks at me and goes, I really like you. I can see that you and I are exactly the same. You and I see eye to eye on everything, and that you agree with me that ... Well, I was mortified. I could not be farther from that opinion, right? But he doesn't know that, and that's the sign. I don't want to say the sign of a good therapist, but that's a sign of being neutral to these very disparate points of view, even if you're not. Now, I'm using this as an example because you, if you are a provider, a clinician, if you are a light worker, if you're working with people, if you have a family, if you're on the planet, you are going to be faced with reconciling your opinions about these things, and people are going to want to engage you. Now, I make no judgment about your opinion. This YouTube live is not about your opinion or my opinion. This is about how do we all navigate this together, understanding that there is a purification going on the planet. There is a battle between good and evil. Now, by the way, the evil people think they're good, and the good people think they're good, and everybody thinks they're right. I'll say that again. The evil people think they're good. The good people think they're good, and everyone thinks they're right. So the question becomes, how do you navigate that? Because I'm just going to tell you, and I'm in my new office. I have a new office. I'm not going to show. I'll show it to you at some point with a TikTok or something. It's beautiful. It's a corner. It's got a beautiful window, beautiful courtyard, bigger. In fact, I'm getting the new blinds on Monday installed. And so I'll show it to you guys when it's all finished. And Joshua says, what does the other side say about good versus bad people? That's great. As you know, I've had near-death experiences. As you know, I'm psychic. As you know, I'm a physical medium. As you know, I transverse these realms. Just did a class in San Diego on realm travel where I did readings for about 35 people, did individual readings for 35 people. This is going to push some buttons. But I'm going to say it anyway. We as humans cannot know darkness without the light. We cannot know good without evil. Everything, even we talk about in the Hawaiian tradition, is a dichotomy, right? The first dichotomy is male, female, right? Yeah, here I go. You can go wild. Hello, Aurelie, Colin. From the point of view of the other side, we are all souls on a path of development and evolution. And that, yes, evil exists in an earthbound sense. And we all have been the good, bad, and the ugly, meaning that if you buy the argument about past lives, you use some extreme examples. These are extreme examples. We learned from the Holocaust. You know, what's the saying? We must never forget. We learned from genocide. We learned from war. I said this to the group in San Diego a couple weeks ago, that if you had no, you know what, I'm going to bring it, lest I have you log off and scream and shake your fist at me. If you think about, and I've said this to you before, if you think about the things you have gone through, just look at this lifetime, your challenges, your trauma, your family, your siblings, your school, your work, your illnesses, then look at what you're proud of what you've accomplished. And I'll generalize this to the other side. Trust me, I'll get there. If you look at what you're proud of, your family, your children, your grandchildren, your career, money, material things, physical body, whatever, and look at what you're proud of, look at what you've accomplished, I would ask you, was that easy? Was that doctorate easy? Was that certification easy? Was it risk-free? Was it guaranteed? Was it overnight? Was it comfortable? Was that marriage comfortable? Was raising children comfortable and convenient and overnight and quick fixed? I think not. So as you look at those things that you've moved through, that you've learned, how you've evolved as a human, how you've evolved as a partner, as a spouse, as a parent, as a sibling, as a child, and so on. I'm in a teaching facility right now. We just did 2 hours of supervision with our graduate students and residents and doctoral candidates and interns and on and on and on. And it was great. It was really, really great. And they are all going through their paces. Well, humans, from a larger perspective, from a spiritual perspective, we are going through our paces. Uh, I had cancer, you know. I remember people saying, gee, cancer was the best thing that ever happened to me. It was such a great learning experience. And I thought back then, 20 years ago, I was like, are you nuts? You know? And now I can say that because I'm through it. If you would have asked me while I was in it, it was really, it sucked, right? And so on. Now, the human species, if you will, is also going through its paces. Now, from the point of view, because I do channel the other side, humankind right now on the planet is going through its own metamorphosis, its own evolution, or as the Buddhists would say, its own human revolution, right? And what that is a very clear battle between the forces of good and evil. Now, I'm not talking Lord of the Rings, although those, whether you look at Star Wars or Lord of the Rings or any of those archetypical stories, the hero's journey, that's invariably the story, right? Now, if you take it to Minnesota, no, let's take it back to my bus driver. We did his values. And by the way, just to cut to the chase, he salvaged his job. He was a great student. He managed his mouth. You know, he didn't get fired and he learned some valuable tools about how when to keep his mouth shut and how to manage the outrage. Because if you look at a human, if you look at yourself, your outrage about anything is values driven. It's based on your view of the world, your model of the world. It has to be. So if you have a value for integrity, or if you have a value for loyalty, or if you have a value for what would be the big one in Minnesota right now? I don't know. I don't know what you would call it, but what you see are the is the fraud. You see the illegal immigration. You see the attempted deportation of illegal immigrants focused on Minnesota right now, I think because of the surfacing of all the fraud. And you have people with righteous indignation saying, I don't want the murderers and the rapists here. I don't want the fraud, to go, and I don't want the millions of dollars going to a country where that's funding terrorists. And all of a sudden, you have all of this agitation about, oh my God, you know what? I think we're up to about $10 billion in fraud just in Minnesota right now. And there's all this outrage. So the outrage is based in a value. The bus drivers' outrage were all these basically poor people trying to hitch free rides. And this guy was all about following the rules. He's all about integrity. And he doesn't want to let these, forgive my language, low life scum of the earth hitch a free ride. When the homeless person or the pick your group is just trying to get by, right? If you look at body cam, and I don't know why, but you can find it on YouTube. It's great. Body cam footage for shoplifting and all. This is kind of a window into my world. I love looking at that kind of stuff. And I love looking at cop shows. I love true crime. That's my thing. And so if you look at, when COVID happened and people just stopped working and people just stopped paying rent because they could. And you look at and I was going to say fringes of society, but there's a very significant segment of every population that's going to be mentally ill, that's going to be dependent on the government, that's going to be institutionalized, that's going to be unemployed, it's going to be in poverty. That is a statistical fact for now. We could think, oh, it's so much worse. Homelessness is so much worse than it used to be. No, it's not. Or the world is so much more, I don't know, full of crime, full of all this stuff. I don't think so. People ask me, is there more child abuse than there used to be? Is there more domestic violence than there used to be? Is there more sexual assault than there used to be? No, we just hear about it more because of this, child abuse, beating kids, sex with people that don't want it has been happening since humans on the planet. And it wasn't reported. It wasn't thing. Now, what I'll tell you about our veterans program, we got the nicest Google review about our veterans program this morning. I'm still tickled. I'll share it somewhere. It was a woman who's a veteran, and she just went on Google, and we can't solicit in a clinical sense. We can't solicit feedback or reviews, and so it has to just come from their heart. Let me just look here. Do it. Push the button below. It's sensationalized by every metric. There has been a stark drop off of crime, particularly violent. Yes. So statistically, there's less of all of that stuff, but it feels like front and center because we hear about it every day, all day long, all day long. We don't hear about the good stuff. We hear about this because it gets clicks. Now, I will tell you, Renee Good was killed a few blocks from my current home in Minnesota. Uh, the Alex Preddy was killed a few blocks from my current home in Minnesota. Across the street from my current home in Minnesota is a Hilton Inn where ICE agents are staying. My 35-year-old son works on a crew in which a Mexican restaurant was shut down by ICE. This is real. It's happening. It's front and center. I don't like it. It is not somebody else's backyard. It is my backyard. George Floyd was killed within view of the apartment I lived in undergrad in Minneapolis. My town burned for days and looted. And my partner's police precinct was burned. The third precinct was the one burned. And I'm not going to go into the details. And so it's easy to say, well, wow, Gaza is way over there and the Ukraine is way over there. And, this doesn't happen in my backyard. I think what brings it home is that it's happening right now in my backyard, which makes it difficult for me to manage myself. So we'll get to that about how do you manage yourself in this. So the idea from the other side is given back to your hero's journey, what you're practicing and what you're working through in terms of your development spiritually, mentally, physically, emotionally, is very personal to you. What I will say is that what's going on in the world, given that you are a light worker, you are called upon, whether you're just a parent and trying to navigate a teenager or navigate your kids and grandkids, whether you're a practitioner of some sort, your people are going to come to you looking for the wisdom, looking for the answers, looking for how do I reconcile this? How do I reconcile? Just like in the Holocaust, the Germans many of them made to go into the camps once the liberation happened and were forced to look at what was going on right in their own towns. And many of them either had no idea or turned a blind eye and were just sickened by it. Many of the US soldiers, and by the way, the Russian soldiers too, who liberated the camps, were mortified and outraged at the genocide that was going on and didn't really know. And so what's different about then and now is two things. Number one, we have more access to information globally and internationally on a 24-hour clock. But number two, you can find a video to validate your point of view, whatever your point of view is. And so I had this is cute. This is funny. Had my group supervision with the students today, and we have a doctor. I'm a doctoral, I'm a professor, and I teach doctors. Okay, there's a confirmation bias, yes, and so one of my doctoral candidates is giving his dissertation presentation here today to our group, and some of the younger students. Now, when I say younger, I mean like in their 30s. Said, Dr. Scott, did the internet exist when you did your doctorate? And I just I played it up, I said, no, I was, it was the pharaonic times of ancient Egypt, and I'm sarcastic and I'm just irreverent as hell. And I notice my brother helped coach me on this, that with my students, they take me very literal, and so I have to be really careful about my humor because they don't get it. They just kind of like, what? You were well, yeah, I was the assistant to the Pharaoh, ancient Egypt, Ramses the second, if you must know, and I was the spirit. I just kind of go on this whole thing. And I inscribed my dissertation in cuneiform on stone tablets, and I'm just going on. And they're looking at me like, huh? Like I was serious. So cute. I said, yes, we did have the internet way back in the 2000s, Yes, but we didn't have AI. We didn't have ChatGPT, which I love, by the way. I love AI. I wish I was more facile with it, and I will get facile with it. It's a wonderful tool, and I have used it, and I believe wholeheartedly in it. But I don't think it's a substitute for thinking or consciousness. I don't think it's a substitute, for like that. And so now I will be like you. We'll be on the internet. We'll see things. We'll see videos, and I kind of go, I don't think that's real. Like I watch a lot of wildlife videos, and I'll see a safari with a big male lion crawl into the lap of a tourist on safari, and I go, and like so what I'll do is I'll see that, and then I'll like show one of my kids or one of my students who was like, "Is this real?" And they went, "Oh no, that's AI generated." They can tell. I'm getting better at telling, but understand, if you even go to the video of the Renee Good death, tragic, with the Alex Preddy death, you can get a video of whatever you want. And so, my point to all this is that our media isn't a replacement for your own thinking. You know, it's for your own consciousness, for your own responsibility to live congruently with your values. Now, I'm going to add in a model here that I think is an important one as we look at, like, how do you navigate this anyway? I've been very sad, about what's going on in my own hometown. I was sad after George Floyd, right? Now, I don't typically get into the granular, polarized points of view, right? I would challenge you at this point around any of this stuff, right? To look at how your thinking is. Is your thinking very much black and white, meaning right, wrong? Either all this way, all that way, all left, all right. The dichotomies that we talk about, where part of me wants this, part of me wants that. It's a dichotomy. Check yourself, because if your thinking is extremely black and white, it's either all one way or all another, that's going to cause you discomfort. That's going to never, you can do whatever you want. You're an adult, you can do whatever you want. But I would ask you to consider that most of this stuff is very complicated. People say to me, having worked with homeless people for 40 years, why are there homeless people? And I'm very careful what I say. It's like say a lot of homeless. I said a good percentage of homeless people are substance using and mentally ill, and then there's the many people who just fall in hard times and they lose their job or they get laid off. And so it's not a single cause for homelessness, right? It's a very multivariate, very complex system of problems. And as I've looked at homeless resources and things that, so I'm just going to use this country, what we have done in the United States to try to combat homelessness, we have thrown a lot of money at it to no avail. And I'm not going to get into that. It's just an example. It's a very complicated process. I worked in an emergency department for 10 years in Pasadena, and Pasadena is a very moneyed community. That is the Tournament of Roses. The Rose Parade is there. And so they want it to look good. And so homelessness was not very welcome. It didn't look good for the image of Pasadena. And so I was part of the committee that did a sobering station, did the homeless shelter. And I was in the ER every single day of my life with homeless people coming in with various issues and looking for help. And most of those people, when I would say, I have a shelter I can help you get into, they were not interested in that. And they would say, look, I'm homeless for a reason. I like being homeless. I get a check. I like to drink. I want to drink it. I don't want to spend it on some board and care thing. I get my meds. I live under the bridge. Nobody bugs me. I don't have to be a certain place at a certain time. And I would have these conversations daily with people who would say, no, 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 I know that the shelter's there. And I know that if it gets too cold, I can go there. And I know if it's really inclement weather, well, in Pasadena, it's California. It's not, it's a lovely place to live. I don't choose to have those rules. The reason I'm off the grid is because I don't want to live with society, and they were very reasonable about it. They were not they were kind. Most of them I got to know because they were frequent flyers. When they would be brought in maybe intoxicated, and I would be discharging them in the morning when I came in for my shift, and I just have conversation after conversation, and I knew them. They knew me, and they'd want breakfast, and they want a bus pass, and they'd want their medicines filled, and I was the one that could do all that for them. And they were very clear that their homelessness was a choice. Um, and that's going to push some buttons. you know? Um, so you get to decide a couple things. Number one, what is it you can directly control about anything at all? If you have a 2-year-old, good luck. If you have a teenager, good luck. Can you directly control another living system? And I say, no, you can't. The only living system you can control is yours. If you have a husky, I wish you the best. I have a grand dog, Revan, the cutest dog in the world. When Josh and I get on Zoom, it is Revan's cue to need to go outside. No matter if he's been outside 16 times, when Josh and I get on Zoom to just catch up, Revan is cutest dog in the world, by the way, and the most developmentally advanced dog. I'm supposed to say this. The funniest dog, the smartest dog, the most beautiful dog, my grand dog. It is Revan's cue when Josh's attention is focused on the computer for Revan to need to go out. He's a very smart boy. And then Josh goes, hold on, I got to take him out. Right. And then, I lose him. So the only thing you can directly control is you, your behavior, what you do, and what you think. Now, already people will push back and goes, I can't control my thinking. My thinking is all over the place. I have ADHD and I'm a mess. But you can actually corral your thinking. That's what cognitive behavioral therapy is, corralling your thinking. So the only person you can directly control, that's the first circle. It's the smallest circle in your sphere of influence. Next level is where can you influence? Now, I would like to think that I have influence with some people, with my people here, with people I serve, with my family, that I influence. Listen to that word, influence. I can't control them. I joke here that I feel like a broken record, about, and if you have a job and if you work in a workplace, right? The rules, the regulations, the policies, the procedures, right? It's like I don't make them up. I don't make up the regulations around mental health. I have to enforce them. But do I control them? No, God, no. Could I control? Now, see, if I could control insurance companies, I would, and I would have them do different things. If I could control the president, I would. If I could control the Somalis, I would. I can control me. I can control. Oh, it pissed me off. You'll love this. I lost a bunch of weight. It used to piss me off when someone would say to me at 350 pounds, well, you can control what you put in your mouth. Oh, I get pissed because it didn't feel like it. It didn't feel like I could control. My eating was so out of control. My drinking of wine was so out of control. I didn't feel like I could control it. And I would get pissed. I wouldn't outwardly lash out, but I'd go, what do you mean? I have to have that cheesecake. It flew in my mouth. I have no ability to control what I'm eating, which has been a work in progress. And you know that story. And I know we're all on this path together, which is awesome because we're all in this together. So the second level of your sphere of influence is where you can influence. And then the third one is what's beyond you, which is the largest sphere in terms of what you're able to influence. I find humans that are the most miserable, and listen carefully, I find humans who are the most miserable put most of their energy up against what is beyond them. I'll say that again, and this is being recorded. I find that humans who are the most miserable put most of their conscious energy against that which is beyond them. Just gonna let that sit in the air for a minute. The worrying, the Sturm und Drang, the drama. Now I get it. True confessions here, man. There's some drama that I look at, whether it's fictional or real life, and I can't turn away from it because it's like adrenaline. We're adrenaline junkies, we're dopamine junkies. We love that. And so, as a result of watching this, take a look at where, if I'm really upset with this, pick your topic: Minnesota, Ukraine, Gaza, Israel, economy, the world, global warming. Pick your topic. If I'm really upset about it, take a look at, are you, what are you doing? Are you doing anything? Can you do anything? Because the more powerless you feel about a given situation, the more depressing that is, right? I am powerless to fix ice or to fix the president or to fix the Gaza thing, you know. Now, another polarizing factor is how much information are you letting in? How much news, whatever it is, are you engaging with? I have looked at the videos for both Renee Good and for Alex Preddy. I've looked at all of them. Not as an obsessive, but people are coming to me every day, all day, really struggling with this thing in Minnesota, knowing that I'm from there. And they're not like accusing me of anything. They're just saying, "Wow, this must be really hard. Can we please talk about it?" And it's becoming a very polarizing thing among marriages and in families. You know how which side do you fall on? And you can pick again, pick your president, pick your situation. This is the polarizing thing. And then this chunking way up to the other side is the nature of human existence. We are here to learn how to reconcile good and evil and which side. Understand that um, the ICE agents believe they're doing the right thing. The politicians in Minnesota believe they're doing the right thing. The president believes he's doing the right thing. The people who stole all the money are sending it back to wherever, Somalia or wherever, think they're doing the right thing. The terrorists think they're doing the right thing. Hitler thinks and thought he was doing the right thing. He was going to make a beautiful master race. He absolutely believed in his convictions. And you can look at any culture, any religion, any well, the issue that people ask me, how is it that the Somali people have had a different time assimilating to American culture versus in the 70s we had the Hmong or Vietnamese people come to Minnesota who have assimilated in a much more seamless way. And you know, a lot of times the answer is, well, the Somalis are Muslim and they believe in Sharia law. And I'm not going to get into all that, but that Sharia law is the law of their land, and not even the land; it's their religion. And so we don't practice that in the United States. And I'm not going to get into how dicey that would be, but that would, you know, that's a kind of a deal breaker. And if you understand now, I'm going to say this: if you see pictures of Little Mogadishu in Minneapolis, it's on the west bank of the University of Minnesota. So remember I told you that George Floyd was killed where I lived in undergrad? Well, Little Mogadishu is the apartment complex I lived in for 2 years, and also in college. That's where this is all. This is the epicenter of the Somali people in Minneapolis. And so when I say it's close to home, it's close to home. It's right. It's my whole life in Minnesota is around all of these different places. Now, I'm not saying that to impress you. I'm just saying that when you say, "Oh, you wouldn't understand," well, I kind of it's like right here. You know, it's really right here. So figure out what you own, what you can't own, where you can influence if you'd like to, and what's beyond you. You'll be happier and more peaceful if you can let go of what's beyond you. And if you're not willing to protest or take a stand or donate money or do what you can, and I do have a lot of my clients come to me and say, "How can I help? Is there anything that I can do to help?" What it's called when they dictate one of their girls to be their boy. Oh yeah, that's it. It's that's a whole thing. So in Afghani, it's called bachi baza. It's where boys are cross-dressed into girls, and I suspect that the cultures have the thing. Yeah, and it's uh, it's a thing where, and I don't want to get a conversation about their culture, but there are a lot of prohibitions, in terms of the Muslim. And again, I am not an expert in Islamic studies, and so I just know what I hear and what I talk about. Um, Bachabazi is the Afghani version of when they essentially traffic children to have sex with older men. And that it's usually boys who are dressed up like girls who dance with them. And there's a Netflix documentary called "The Dancing Boys of Afghanistan," if you're interested, and that has been widely publicized. And so, because it's a homosocial culture, meaning women don't fraternize with men. Women, they're separate, and so men who are needing to be very sexual have sexualized young boys because apparently that's better than sexualizing young girls. And so, and you can hear that I'm kind of like, it's not great. None of it's great. And I work with a lot of veterans now who experienced that when they went to the Middle East, where they saw that and they come in. And I'm going to tell you, in my veteran population now, we have hundreds now. And like I said, we got a wonderful review today from a veteran who's just really feeling better. These are my heart. These veterans are just my heart. And what was surprising about this cohort of veterans is that there is as much military sexual trauma among the men as there is the women. I'm just going to say that again. 600 veterans or so in the last couple of years since we started this program. There is as much military sexual trauma among the men as there are the women. Now, statistically, there are fewer women in the program because there's more men in the military. It just goes that way. That's neither here nor there. So figure out what you own. Figure out then what's the learning for you. If you're really lit up and really polarized and really outraged, do your work, do your practices, we have ho'oku'u, we have release work, we have meditations, we have recordings, things like that. It is outrageous. Genocide is outrageous. Murder is outrageous. This is outrageous. These are outrageous times. And you have to figure. So now, the dichotomy I face is I want to be informed without being depressed and sobbing every day. That's a dichotomy for you. I want to know what's going on. I feel like it's my civic duty to know what's going on. But how much of that do I take in? Knowing that every single day I have people walking into my office who are in crisis, who are having, so I have a duty, and my story. I burned the candle at both ends for years, got cancer, had a head injury, blah, blah, blah. So my commitment for the next 30 years of this incarnation is to manage myself more effectively. But I would never be able to put my head in the sand. That's just not me. I gotta know. I gotta do my own research. I've got to figure it out. I got to make sense of it for me. I've got to look at all aspects of it. And I clearly have opinions. I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, I'm so beautifully neutral. I'm so wonderfully enlightened that I have no opinions. Bullshit. I am just as polarized as the rest of us. This is in my hometown. I mean, this is, my son, who is ethnically Mexican, he's adopted, fostered, cannot leave the house. I mean, will not leave the house right now because it's not safe in my very white, very wealthy Minneapolis suburb. There it is. So people could say, oh, well, Patrick, he's really so very white and so very privileged and so very wealthy and so very silver spoon in his mouth. He couldn't possibly know what it's like. Well, I don't know what it's like. I'm not, but I had a Vietnamese patient a few weeks ago who said that anyone who is not this color is being targeted. Anyone that is not this, including Native Americans, by the way, which I think is hilarious. I mean, I'm trying to laugh it off. Native American, like, Cherokee, Ojibwe, like Native, the people that were there before we were, the Irish, Swedish, Scottish people. And they're being targeted because they look ethnically something other than this. And you can tell by my intensity that I have feelings and I have extraordinary views. Now, I am not going to be, and this is back to you are not going to be effective in helping others or managing your families if you are so lit up and outraged that you can't, hold it together. So I say to you as we conclude today, I would like you to self evaluate. I had a patient the other day who's really having a hard time in her relationship where they're just literally polarized and they can't even talk to each other about it because they're very polarized because one of them is very, very black and white. And so this idea that if you look at your thinking, let's see what example I want to use. I'll use Alex Preddy. Okay, I'll use Alex Purdy. Now, interesting. I learned today that MSNBC doctored his photograph. I saw on something that his actual photograph looks a certain way, but then the press photo that they posted of him kind of on his knee was doctored to make him look a lot more handsome than he actually is. Not that he's not a handsome guy or wasn't a handsome guy, and I'm sure he was a lovely guy, don't get me wrong, but they doctored the photo to make him kind of look kind of hot, you know? And I thought that was interesting. Like, you can't just take a photograph of a guy who's been killed in a situation and just leave him the way he, may he rest in peace. No, no, no. Photo was photoshopped so that he looked exceptionally handsome. Not that he was not. You get what I mean. It just like, is that really necessary? Must we Photoshop every photograph? Um, and so one side is going to portray him one way, the other side is going to portray him another way. I would have you reconcile. Let's just use this Minnesota example. And I would have you look at your core values. What do you stand for? What is the most upsetting about all this? Is it integrity? Is it accountability? For me, the fraud, I'm I may be more outraged by the fraud. And I'll tell you why. I run a low income mental health clinic in Las Vegas, and we can't get funding to save our lives. We cannot get the insurance reimbursements are declining. And I'm not going to go into my soapbox about that. I mean, it's happening right now where reimbursements are shrinking and we're having a hard time getting paid. And we serve the poor. We serve Medicaid. We serve, homeless. We serve mentally ill. We serve veterans. We're doing God's work here and we can't get money, and so then when I hear $9 billion of human service funds went to daycares and autistic services that were not delivered, and transportation services that were not provided, and translation services that were not provided, and food for our future services that were not provided, and billions of dollars left in suitcases that went to fund terrorist activities in Africa. I'm a little outraged by that because my work every day, including my money and my own money every day, has been put into this organization to help veterans and the poor and the indigent and that kind of stuff. And we cannot get paid to save our lives. And so when I look at just one sliver of an example, I'll let it go. Autism funding. So one particular year it was 1.4 million. Within 5 years, it's 150 million. So that's a tenfold increase in funding for autism services. What it is being discovered now, a lot of this is going on right now. People are being indicted. People are going to jail. They are handling it. I'm keeping track. They are handling it. They are getting people, holding people accountable for this kind of stuff. So what they would do is that, and this was all Somali driven. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be difficult. Yes, white people do fraud. Yes, fraud is everywhere. But right now, the spotlight is on the 80,000 Somali residents of the state of Minnesota, or 100,000 maybe, and that is just the spotlight is focused on that population right now. And so what they would do is they would pay families to bring their kids in. They would falsify diagnoses and say that every kid was autistic and that because of these kids, we need this money to provide these services to these kids because they're all autistic. Now, the same thing went on with transportation and food for our future and all that sort of thing. And come to find out, I think there were 590 providers, that were engaged in this for a very small population. And so what I hear then from other people is that when you call around, even like to the daycares, they're closed, they're not taking new people, and that hardworking families are having to pay out of pocket for daycare. But yet there are hundreds allegedly. So you get my drill. That this all this fraud going on. And so and then this person says, yet I can't find myself to a diagnosis because I'm dumb. Right, exactly. And so it's outrageous. And I have to manage myself because I live it every day, every day. This idea that, we're not going to pay you heads up or, whatever to provide services to veterans, but some other program is getting billions of dollars for not doing anything. And so so for me, it's around justice and fairness and accountability and integrity and all that stuff. It just rocks my world. So, what I'd like you to do is I would like you to figure out what you can control directly. You can control your doing and your thinking. If protesting is helpful, do it peacefully. I would recommend that you reconcile what your values are. If you need a handout, I have one. This person says, we're just pounding out trauma, but wearing it now too. But, okay. Anyway, so I appreciate your time and attention. If you need a handout to clarify your values, let us know. Be happy to provide it for you. Um, yeah, uh, Josh can sign up for the next STFU. That'll help. And this person says warring against. Sorry, yeah, we're anyway. I love you all, and this has been a great uh, time to talk to you. So I'll see you. I won't see you next week. I'll be in Montana teaching doctors, but maybe in a couple weeks. No, in a couple weeks I'll be teaching Huna. So I may maybe a few weeks before we do this. But have a great week.